Hi, my name's David Roscoe. I head up communications at the ATU. I'm going to do a short presentation called ATU Media Training, How to Get Your Story Told. I'm going to offer you some tips and advice on how to reach out to local media as well as other media to get your story told and get some publicity for your local union. So moving on to my first slide. So some of the learning objectives of this are pretty straightforward. Why reach out to media? Why do we reach out to the media? How to prepare for media interviews, some do's and don'ts. Identifying and capitalizing on media opportunities that you can use with your local stories that will be effective to get out to the media and reporters. How to respond to tough questions that reporters give you. Often you can be doing a press conference or something. You want to be prepared and able to answer these tough questions. And then some practice by drafting press release, taping some mock interviews, and actual podcast interviews that we can record. So now, let's talk about why you want to reach out to the media. News media is not the enemy and can be effective to get our messages out. Oftentimes people think that the news media is always out to get unions. And there's a reason for that. And but it can be used effectively to get our message out to our riders and other groups that we really need. So that's why it's important to reach out to the media. Also, media will cover ATU stories. They'll cover our strikes, our contract negotiations, protests, rallies, demonstrations that we do. If there are going to be transit cuts to the system that will impact riders and others. Charitable activities such as Stuff the Bus, raising various things, working with local charities, assaults on transit workers. Transit worker assaults have been a big problem with our members, and the media definitely like to cover that stuff. ATU heroes. Oftentimes we hear about, in fact, I heard of one just today, about ATU heroes, one where our members are out there going above and beyond. For instance, in the last couple of weeks, we've heard of stories of ATU members saving 2 children who were lost wandering. Also recently, there was a ATU member in Spokane who saved a kindergartner who wandered away from his classroom. So these are stories that really oftentimes don't get told to the media, and when we hear these stories, we need to push it out to the local media. It's great things our members do. It changes the view that people have on our union. So some additional, we need to tell our position, our story is another reason we reach out to the media. If we're in contract negotiations or something, we want our position out there. If we don't reach out to the media, then we don't know our message will be out there. Share opinions and attitudes with the public. Motivating audiences like our riders, the public, and politicians to get talking and doing. For instance, if there's transit cuts happening, we want to reach out to the media to tell our riders and to tell politicians and the public that these cuts cannot happen and we need funding. This is why people who are deciding what the news decide that it is news. Ask yourself the following question to determine if your story is actually news. Is the information new? Is it timely? Is it something that's happened soon? How widely known are the people involved? Is the source of the information credible? Does the information affect the news outlet's audience? For instance, if it's transit cuts, obviously affects riders in your community. How close to home is the story for the outlet's audience? Once again, if it's for instance, it was something that happened with the hero, kid being lost, as I mentioned above, that's a story that people can identify with. Is the message argument addressed in the story persuasive? Is there a built-in conflict? For instance, if you're having a strike or you're doing a rally to protest something, cuts to transit, of course it's a built-in conflict. Is there anything about the story that makes it unusual or off the beaten path? Is there human interest in the element in the story? That has to do with these charitable activities, rider issues, ATU heroes. Is there an inherent emotional response to the story that will move the audience? Various things can do that. As I mentioned, the charitable audience, the ATU heroes, but even stuff that has to do with transit cuts, because it's impacting local people in our community who might not be able to get to work because of these cuts to transit. Is there a universal truth expressed in the story which people with identify? I think this is pretty self-explanatory too. If it's a contract negotiations happen or it's transit cuts happening, of course it's a universal truth that's being in which people in our community can identify with. Media opportunity examples. These are some examples of, what would make a good media. When the public debate or controversy around an issue is aroused. When the opposition actively calls for action against you. When your issue is being covered by the media. If there's a strike, obviously it's going to be newsworthy. When hearings are held on an issue, for instance, say there's safety issues happening within your community or assaults that are happening, they might hold the local city council might hold hearings on this issue. When a legislative body debates your issue or something related to the issue, that could do with transit funding, that could do with a number of different things happening with your community. When the opposition is seeking funding for competing programs or policy initiatives, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of our transit funding around the country is down in many ways. And this is obviously, so cities are stretched to have enough funding. So oftentimes they're deciding whether they're going to fund transit or they're going to fund even education or something similar. Key steps to prepare. Whenever you're developing a media outreach, there are a couple key steps to prepare. Preparation, executing, feedback, evaluation, and modification. So if you're going to hold a press conference, you want to be well prepared. Well prepared in terms of setting up what your message is, what your things are doing. Then you want to execute it well. So how are you doing it? Then you want to look at feedback. Did people get the right message across? Did they get the story across? That has to do with this next step, which is evaluation, which is, was it effective? Was it what we did? Then this is probably the most important point is modification. What will we do better this time? What did we learn from what we did? So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this in the next couple slides. So for our next slide, understanding the media. This is an important slide as well, too. There's 3 different types of print media. There's print, which is more in-depth, specialized, flexibility, less visual, know your stuff. That's your daily newspaper, weekly newspaper. Then there's broadcast, which is TV, radio. There's an immediacy to it. It's very visual, or in the sense of radio, it's very auditory. Yet they have tighter deadlines, and there's more style over substance. We like to jokingly say that if it bleeds, it leads. And that's certainly the case with if you watch your local news. Then there's the internet, which is websites, YouTube, Facebook, bloggers, Twitter. Social media has really taken over this. But one of the interesting things about media is all media now use multiple news outlets. For instance, every print newspaper has a website. They're often doing video. They have social media. So they're pushing their news out various ways. So in many ways, the print, broadcast, internet is very blurred, the lines between these 3. But you should be aware that they are slightly different. So next slide. Who are your key audiences? Internal. There's internal and external. The internal audience are our members, management team, so the team of the management, leadership team. Then there's external audiences, which are our riders, our policymakers, and the media, as well as the general public. So these are your key audiences. You're going to change your message a little bit depending on which audience you're trying to reach. Media's audience. In most cases, the media's convey your message, not your primary audience. Target media that your primary audience rely upon for information. For instance, if it's an issue that you want riders to know about, you're probably going to target TV and print because they watch TV they watch the local news. The local news probably has a website, and they may even be social media as well. When to craft media messages. To impart information. To build awareness of your issue, whether you're having a strike, you want people to know about a contract dispute you're in the middle, whether it's an ATU hero story, or whether it's an assault of one of your members. It could be a wide variety of things. To motivate people to act. For instance, if you're facing transit cuts in your community, you want to push, you might be holding a protest to protest those things, and what you do is you want people to act, so you're going to target your riders and say, call your local city council member to do that. So you're trying to motivate people to act. And to general affinity, which is self-explanatory as well. And to defend your position. If you're in the middle of a strike or you're in the middle of a contract dispute, you're going to craft your media message slightly different than if you were talking about an ATU, well, very different than an ATU hero story. What is a message? Information, news, intelligence, advice, directions on how do people react, and a request for people to do things. So that is really what your message could be. Any variety of these. Maybe it's just one, or it could be a combination. Most of them are probably going to be a combination of some of these. And then a moral point is the last one. Developing our message. Real people protecting our profession. These are the points that you want to use in how you are going to develop your message. You don't want to talk about anything in sort of a big picture. You want to use real people. By using real people, examples of real people in your local, it really protects our profession and gives you it's really a human element of it. Relating to riders and the public. You want to develop a message that your riders can understand. And I'll show you a couple sample messages further on down here. This is probably one of the most important things. You want to be clear, concise, and simple with your message. You don't want to, you want your words to be quick, to the point. Frame our message to appeal to your target audience. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. We're going to have a different message slightly different for our riders, our non-riders in the public, to our members, and obviously to public officials are going to be slightly different. Use everyday language, avoid jargon. For instance, in our industry, we use a lot of different jargon. It could be, trying to think of something off the top of my head, headway or something like that. Headway or other things that the average person is not going to know. We should say stops or our route. We shouldn't be using a headway, which the average rider, or the average politician even, or the average public person in the public wouldn't understand. Appeal to people's values and emotions. For instance, when you're talking about transit cuts, you want to talk about the impact it has. If people aren't going to be able to get to school, work, the doctor, the grocery store. These are things that people understand and can relate to. Personal experiences, humanizing the message, use workers. I talked about this a little bit more. You know, when a union head is talking, people think of it as just the union, but use your workers, use who are your trusted members, personalize, talk about their message, use riders to talk about. This is why, Larry talks a lot about building coalitions with our riders. And this is what you need to do, because there's nothing better. You can talk about how riders, with transit cuts happening, riders aren't going to be able to get to the place, but it's even better to have an actual rider who's maybe a student, a worker, or who's not going to be able to get to school or not going to be able to get to work because of these transit cuts. So which message appeals to the public more? Slashing bus services and laying off bus drivers is not the right way to balance the city budget. Our members have sacrificed enough. Or the public deserves reliable, affordable public transportation that can get them safely to and from work, school, and other daily tasks. Cutbacks to bus service will hurt our community in this times of economic recovery. Very obvious which one is the better message. It's the bottom one. The public deserves reliable, affordable public transportation. That's because we're not talking about greedy union members wanting more money. This is about the public. So this is how you have to think about it. It says the same thing, but it says it two different ways. And this is what you have to think in doing your messages. A few key ATU messages. Public transportation benefits our society. Service cuts impact the local economy. Transportation is about equity. And if you read further on, we go into more detail about these below the slides. How to craft messages. What is the issue? What is the problem that we're dealing with? These are things you have to think about when crafting your messages. What are the relevant facts and findings? Do they constitute new information? For instance, if you're in contract negotiations or something that was developed recently that happened that you need to let the public know about. Were there recent transit cuts that you need to let people know about? Is there a remedy? Are we going on strike for a reason, or is there something else that needs to be done? Who are the audiences? Is it riders? Is it public officials? Is it the public? Or maybe it's a combination of the two or all three. This is what you need to, or maybe it's even our members.